Will the state of Israel survive? I'll answer that question from an ancient source easily available to most people, and that source is the Bible and the prophecies found in its pages that are coming to pass right before your eyes. Israel is surrounded by enemies, and it should be evident from the atrocities committed by Hamas on October the 7th, along with their barrage of thousands of rockets raining down on Israeli cities, that the Gaza Strip is a serious threat to the peace and safety of Israel. But Hamas is not the only threat. The area known as the West Bank bulges into the heart of this tiny country, and Palestinian terrorists pose an ever-present threat. But this is far from the greatest threat. Hezbollah to the north in Lebanon reportedly has as many as 150,000 precision-guided rockets, exponentially more dangerous than Hamas's homemade rockets. With so many, they can overwhelm Israeli defenses, accurately hitting cities and military facilities. Even Yemen, 1,000 miles away, is getting into the action with ballistic missiles and suicide drones. Of course, Iran itself, the country sponsoring Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthi rebels, and other lesser-known groups, is behind all of this. Not only is Iran a serious conventional military threat with its rockets and drones, but if it is allowed to develop nuclear weapons, which it is desperately attempting to do, it could easily destroy Israel. But the threat goes much further. It seems that the whole world is against this tiny nation. There are more United Nations resolutions condemning Israel than there are against any other country, in fact, all other countries combined. Why such hatred against Israel when compared to human rights violations committed by many other nations? Consider the demonstrations around the world. Even in the United States, tens of thousands of university students and others are calling for the extermination of Israeli Jews. That's what is meant by the mantra, from the river to the sea. Now, some even go further and call for the extermination of Jews everywhere. What's going on here? Bible prophecy answers this question in shocking detail and accuracy. I'm not talking about vague, difficult to discern statements, but easy to understand prophecies given thousands of years in advance that you can see fulfilled in your lifetime. So let's see what this ancient source says. Jacob was the grandson of Abraham. His name was changed to Israel, and he was the father of 12 sons. One of those sons was named Judah. He's the father of the Jews. Prior to his death, he called his sons together and said to them what would become of their offspring far into the future. Notice it in Genesis, the 49th chapter, and verse 1. And Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather together that I may tell you what shall befall you in the last days." Notice, in the last days. That's the time setting of these prophecies. Many Bible prophecies confirm that we are living in the last days. Now, how could someone possibly know what would happen to his family more than 3,700 years in the future? Were his predictions for the Jews correct? While there's more to the prophecy, I'll focus only on the fact that they would exist as a unified people and possess great military power. Here's what we read about from Jacob's prophecies about the Jews at the time of the end, verses 8 and 9. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who shall rouse him? Now, if the Japanese awakened a sleeping giant at Pearl Harbor, as Admiral Yamamoto feared, the last 75 years of history show that every time Israel's neighbors attack him, they awaken a sleeping lion. While they poke the lion, Israel always comes out on top at the end of the day, overwhelming its enemies, even when attacked from all sides. Was Jacob not correct that the Jews would have their hands on the neck of their enemies and would be like a sleeping lion that is best not roused? Some 2,500 years ago, the prophet Zechariah foretold more specific details concerning the Jews and Jerusalem at the end of the age. Think about this. What prediction can you make about any people, any city, or any nation 2,500 years in the future. Note this amazing prophecy found in Zechariah the 12th chapter and verses 2 and 3. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of drunkenness to all the surrounding peoples, when they lay siege against Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall happen in that day that I will make Jerusalem a very heavy stone for all peoples. All who would heave it away will surely be cut in pieces, though all the nations of the earth are gathered against it. We read further in verse 6 how all those coming up against the Jews would run into a buzzsaw. In that day I will make the governors of Judah like a fire pan in the woodpile, and like a fiery torch in the sheaves. They shall devour all the surrounding peoples on the right hand and on the left. But Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place, Jerusalem. Now, friends, this wasn't written yesterday. And consider this. In 70 A.D., Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans. And 65 years later, the Jews were expelled from that area completely, meaning there was no Jewish state from 135 until 1948. All during that time, one people after another controlled Jerusalem and the Holy Land. Turks, Arabs, Egyptians, the Crusaders, from Europe, and also from Britain, but never the Jews. There was no Jewish state until 1948, and the Jews did not control all of Jerusalem until 1967, when they cut their enemies to pieces in a mere 6 days. Now let me ask you 4 important questions. Number 1, do we see the Jews, after being cast out for more than 1,800 years, once again in control of the Holy Land and Jerusalem, just as the prophets said they would? Number 2, is Jerusalem not a troublesome stone on the world scene? Number 3, do we see nations, not only Israel's neighbors, but nations around the world lined up against the Jews? Think about the UN resolutions of condemnation and current demonstrations calling for the extermination of Jews. Number 4, do we not see that every nation which tries to remove the troublesome heavy stone of Jerusalem gets cut in pieces? But the question remains, will the Jews survive against such overwhelming opposition? The answer is yes. Just as God accurately foretold in the pages of the Bible what we are now seeing concerning the Jews and Jerusalem, so he reveals the final outcome. Both the Jews and Jerusalem will survive. Now, how exactly that will happen is revealed in plain language, but you'll have to wait for a future video on this subject. In the meantime, if you'd like to learn more about what to expect in the Middle East in the days ahead, please check out our resource, The Middle East in Prophecy. You can order it by clicking the link in the description. Now, also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you want to understand what's happening in this world through the pages of the Bible.